Today, we're going to talk about the truth about foreign aid. Is it still helping or is it hurting? Foreign aid is supposedly one of the most powerful tools used to fight poverty, support economic development, and respond to crises, particularly in the global south, specifically in Africa. That is probably one of the most known, most well known, most talked about receivers of aid in the world. However, foreign aid is also quickly becoming one of the most controversial methods of international transfer payments. Some see it as an act of solidarity. Others see it as a form of modern colonialism. And now we have a global shift underway. More and more leaders and institutions are saying trade rather than aid. We see this with the USA and new policies under Donald Trump, USAID being pulled out of African countries, their fund being pulled. So, what's really going on? Is foreign aid still relevant? And if not, what is the alternative? Now, foreign aid, what is this exactly? Foreign aid, also called official development assistance, is when a country, typically wealthier, provides resources to another, usually poorer, to support development or emergency needs. This could be food aid during a famine, medical supplies during a pandemic, or long-term investment in roads, schools, energy systems, and other infrastructure. In 2023, global foreign aid reached over $220 billion. Now, that's a massive sum, more than the GDP of many of the nations that receive aid. Now, there are different types of aid. We have bilateral aid, which is when a country gives directly to another government. We have multilateral trade, or multilateral aid rather, which is pulled through institutions like the World Bank or the UN. We have humanitarian aid, which is short-term relief during crises. And there is development aid, which is supposed to be for long-term growth. On the surface, it sounds like a noble enterprise, and in many ways, it can be, and it has been. Aid has helped reduce child mortality, fight HIV/AIDS, it's built roads, and it supports education in places that need it most. But here is the thing, here is where it gets tricky. Who really benefits from aid? As it turns out, a large portion of foreign aid doesn't stay in the countries that it is meant to help. According to the OECD, up to 70, even up to 80% of aid ends up back in the donor nation. Now, how? Through something called tide aid. What is this? Let's say country A gives $100 million to country B. But the contract says you must use this money to hire our companies, buy our machinery, use our consultants. So the bulldozers come from country A, the health experts also from country A, the food parcels shipped from the farms of country A. In the end, country B does get the infrastructure, but country A gets the economic boost. This has led some critics to argue that aid is less about generosity and more about a subtle form of self-interest. Does that mean that aid doesn't help at all? Well, not necessarily. The roads still do get built, hospitals still open, children do still go to school. But the deeper question is, does it help enough? Does it create lasting change? And now there's another problem, one that aid cannot fix on its own, and that is corruption. In many developing countries, the amount of money lost to corruption every year is staggering. If we take Nigeria, for example, where billions in oil revenue have vanished due to mismanagement and embezzlement. In some cases, the money lost to corruption is equal to or greater than the amount received in aid. It's like pouring water into a leaking bucket. Yes, aid does provide relief, but if corrupt systems aren't reformed, the impact is always temporary. Aid doesn't automatically create accountability. And in fact, in some cases, it props up regimes with poor governance. This is because donor nations are more focused on stability than reform. What do I mean by this? They want to work with partners that they have history with. You get me? These are people that they can kind of predict their behavior. They know they're not going to act in unpredictable senses. They might not be the best people for the job, but these are people that they understand and can work with because they have that history. So they want that stability more than they want reform. So the logical question is, if corruption is fixed, would we even need aid? Probably not as much. But ending corruption takes more than a watchdog group or an anti-graft law. It takes strong institutions, free press, civic engagement, and decades of sustained effort. There's one more layer to this issue: politics. Foreign aid often comes with hidden or not so hidden strings attached. Countries receiving aid may be pressured to support the donor nation in international forums, privatize national industries, or align with military and trade objectives or trade objectives. We've seen this during the Cold War, when aid was used as a tool to win allies, whether democratic or authoritarian. This was quite the case with Malawi. When we were supporting the apartheid government, this was down to the CIA funding that both South Africa received and Malawi in conjunction or as attached to South Africa. Because we were attached to South Africa, we received a trickle down of that CIA funding, which was supposed to stop the spread of communism. And it didn't matter that Malawi at the time was not a democracy and that we did have an authoritarian regime. What mattered was stopping the spread of communism. So that is how aid is used to win allies, as a tool. More recently, we see this in the conditions attached to IMF loans, which have sometimes required painful austerity measures and privatization. Aid can serve as leverage, a soft power tool used to influence the internal affairs of sovereign nations. Which leads to a hard question. Can a country truly be sovereign if it depends on another to meet the basic needs of its people? But here's the twist. What good is sovereignty if your population is starving? This is the aid paradox. Between dignity and dependency, What should nations choose? In recent years, we've seen a global shift. More African leaders, economists, and even now, the donor nations are promoting a new mantra: trade, not aid. The idea is simple. Don't just donate to us. Buy from us, invest in us, partner with us. Because trade builds long-term prosperity. It creates jobs, it drives innovation, and it grows industries. Look at countries like Vietnam or Bangladesh. They've lifted millions out of poverty not through aid, but through exports, manufacturing, and foreign direct investment. We have a new example on the continent of Africa, which is Rwanda, a country still recovering from genocide, which is now focusing heavily on becoming a tech and logistics hub. Kenya is rapidly becoming a leader in fintech and clean energy innovation. When you trade with a company, you treat it like an equal. When you aid a country, there is always a power imbalance. This is why many are now calling for this new model, one that prioritizes fair trade terms, debt relief, and access to global markets over endless handouts. So, is aid obsolete? Not quite. In emergencies, like in natural disasters or in pandemics, aid is essential. It saves lives. It can also provide a foundation which funds education, healthcare, and infrastructure that allows countries to eventually stand on their own. But aid must evolve. It must be smarter. It must be more transparent. It must be more locally driven. Aid should support systems and structures. It should not substitute them. And it should never be used to silence accountability or enforce dependence. Ultimately, developing nations today face a critical choice. Do we want to be wolves or lapdogs? A wolf is independent, respected, but life can be hard. A lapdog is fed and protected, but only at the whim of its master. This is the dilemma foreign aid presents. Everyone respects a wolf, but lapdogs live in comfort. The real challenge is becoming a lion. Fierce, independent, but part of a powerful, cooperative pride. That is the future we should aim for. So what do you think? Has foreign aid outlived its purpose, or is it still a force for good? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's talk. If you've enjoyed this deep dive, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who wants to better understand the world we live in. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered.